The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Pirates of Maracaibo, our game of the week, discuss Hobby Jargon in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five games with multi-use cards. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Stoke Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
How you doing, Doug?
Oh, I can't complain. Better than I deserve. How about you?
Yeah, good. No, things are going well. Happy to be here talking games on the Game Schooler Podcast. It's exciting. Get back in the normal routine here.
All right. Well, we've got a little bit of follow-up. It was interesting. A couple episodes back, we talked about the idea of playing games, right out of the box, no teaching.
Yeah, punch to play.
And I was surprised at how many people in our Discord say that that's what they do. They just start punching and playing a game right after they get it, which just seems crazy to me. But I guess, I guess with the podcast, we're doing different stuff on the way that we present games. But even before we had a podcast for game nights, it's like I'd have everything punched, ready to go, and this is what we're playing. And partially, I would guess, as more of a way to pipe myself up just as much as anything else of like, all right, I'm excited to play this and get the rules down and be ready for it. Did that surprise you?
No, I think even in that segment, I was wondering about, I think that we might be the oddballs here.
Yeah.
And I also think back to before we had the Game Schooler Podcast, it was not uncommon for me to get a game from Target, get it home, and get it to the table and force the family to sit down at the table and play. I'm not saying that's what folks on our Discord are doing.
Yeah.
But I know during New Gamer Enthusiasm, it was, all right, it's time to play this game. Let's learn it and play it together. But that's also that's not how we're currently set up. We're usually learning 2 or 3 games per week, going through and playing those either together or on our own so that we can play them together, which the punch to play is challenging.
Yeah, I'm curious if there was something, an experience that I had early or something as a kid or anything like that just, like, I'm sensing that I've tried that once and it was just an unmitigated disaster of me not grasping what was going on, people at the table getting frustrated because they don't know, and that the second people are asking you questions like, I don't know, I just opened up the rules too, and then it's like creates a whole different experience for what everybody is at the table. And I think sometimes when you're the game person in your family, there is that expectation of like, well, you should know how this works. And maybe I just adopted that based on a bad experience sometime of trying to teach and not grasping the rules all the way and just feeling like I am not being a good host here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the analogy that I can make based on what you're saying is, if I'm teaching in a classroom and teaching other people's kids, I don't want to just be making it up as I go.
Yeah.
Right? I want to know the content. I want to know the lesson. I want to know what I'm hoping kids are going to learn and be prepared for where some challenges could be. And I think because you mentioned the game night that you would host before the podcast, that's you. I mean, you're the teacher of the game. So there's nothing wrong with being prepared. But at the same time, I wasn't surprised by the reaction. It was interesting.
I'm more curious on how it works, because like I just can't wrap my brain, like my brain doesn't wrap around that way of if I just did that with my family, like I feel like it would just go over like a lead balloon,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Well, and have we crossed, you and I, but have we crossed the Rubicon where board games are also a part of work a little bit maybe, and it's not just play and pleasure and experiencing the game and seeing what it's about?
I don't know if it's that. I don't see the appeal of uncovering this game as a group. Like that to me is not a group activity. I don't associate it with that, where it's like the idea of like, hey, we're all going to come and learn this together.
Right.
Does not seem like that's the equivalent of like, hey, you all watch me paint type of thing. Like that, those are two.
I think that's different. A lot different.
But I don't associate it with a communal activity.
Sure.
At all. Of like, all right, let's get this out and punch together and do this as part of the I feel like learning the rules and punching and getting ready to play is the work of the hobby.
Okay.
So it's like some people may love that. That is, regardless of whether you have a podcast or not, that's the work of the hobby to me, is like getting a game up and running. And the idea that other people would like to whistle while we're doing that together is so foreign to me that I just find it fascinating. So we're always talking about, how far you're in the hobby and things like that. Apparently, I'm very deep in the hobby.
Yeah, you're pretty deep. You have officially crossed the Rubicon.
I can't be casual anymore, gang. It's got to be all business
I'm
all
not
the
giving
time.
you a hard time, but could you walk into Target, get a game, and just say, "Hey guys, we're going to punch and play this right now"? That doesn't seem like something you'd want to do. That's just not in line with you as a human.
If it's Uno, like it's a basic card game, yeah, like we're gonna. Something that
could be a 3-hour game, Doug, if you play by the rules.
Something that's accessible like that, like a real light game. Yes, I could see myself doing that, but not going to pick up Wingspan off the shelf and try and muddle my way through it.
Ooh.
Any follow-ups for you?
Yeah, I have a big one, so you might want to mark this moment in time where we're at, especially as we start to, get some of our video segments chopped up and out to Board Game Geek and other places. So a few weeks ago, I talked about experiencing a game in the Dized app for the first time in a long time in the What's Awesome with Gaming, and that game is
Elder Scrolls.
The Elder Scrolls, Betrayal of the Second Era. Thank you, Doug. I was getting there.
Well,
I didn't forget the game.
Oh, remember good. Last week I didn't remember.
Gold star for you.
Thank you.
And this is the tutorial guide, Doug. So it's 30-page tutorial guide.
So you just unpunched it and started going through it as a family?
100-page rule book. But some of the things you have to get right if you're talking about a game like this, in all seriousness, because as of the time of this recording, there are 1,041 ratings on Board Game Geek of this game, and it has an average rating of 9.2. So whatever factors you want to say, that could be crowdfund buzz, this, that, there's a lot of people who really love the game. And so I just want to kind of report back and follow up because I didn't know where else it would fit in the segment. Yeah. But I finished my first campaign, Doug, and I did it all by myself.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I do feel a little proud. I probably got 40% of the rules wrong, but that's okay. I'm learning. And a campaign in that game is 3 sessions. And so a few episodes back, when I talked about the Dized app guiding me through the tutorial and how I had a great experience, like it took me more than 20 hours to finish all 3 sessions. 13 different logged plays on Board Game Geek to get through
a campaign.
Job. It really was for about a month. Where some other games that I thought I'd review for the podcast, thought I'd get to, no, because I've got Elder Scrolls set up on the table.
Yeah.
And I played with the characters that were suggested in the tutorial, played with the Dark Elf. I went heavy in the magic lines. My second character was an Argonian. I turned that Argonian into a tank. And unfortunately, in the final battle on the third day, I failed.
Sorry for your loss.
You basically have like a built-in mulligan. And so I was saving it. I was like, okay, I got my, whatever it's called, the built-in retry, the do-over, the extra life, right? And then so I'm going to the rule book to see how it works. And in the final session, in session 3, the built-in mulligan doesn't work. If you haven't used it to this point and you die, you need to rebox everything.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. And the game was a ton of fun. Board game, it was just incredible. There's side quests, there's treasure, there's companions, there's a great storyline. Can't possibly do the game justice in a follow-up, but as I put everything away and got everything boxed up, and my oldest said, "You going to keep it?" I said, "Oh, absolutely. And I can't wait to come back to this one." Very similar to when I did Dead Reckoning, spent about a month and a half going through a saga on Dead Reckoning, where it's just like, I want to play this with people. There's so much here to explore, to learn. There's a ton of content. So if any of our listeners who are in that hobby space have played Too Many Bones and any of those, or if you love the Elder Scrolls, just a phenomenal game. The only thing that I will say, my critique, it's suggested at 2 hours per session plus 30 minutes per individual, and I blew way past that. And it seems like most people online and on their Discord, I mean, you're spending 8 to 10 hours oftentimes to get through a session if you're playing with 2 or 3 people.
Wow.
So I don't know where the game fits for me, and lifestyle, hobby, this, that, the other thing, other than I absolutely loved playing the game. And they did some really nice things with just your skill lines, how you can upgrade them and downgrade them, and you kind of have that freedom to try new things, because it's not like this is a campaign with 50 sessions. I know I'm getting 3 sessions.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Cool. That's exciting. Good to hear about. Again, sorry for your loss, and any rules mistakes are between you and the maker of that game.
Makers. There's a whole team of them. I was the funny thing about that, maybe it's only funny to me, but I was finding out rules mistakes pretty at the midpoint of the game, halfway through the second session, where it's like, oh, I've been handling light fatigue differently. Well, I'll get it right going forward. And so I do feel like I could get that game up and going and moving. I'm not going to say punching and playing, but yeah.
All right. Well, I've got something that's awesome in gaming, and a rarity that I want to shout out, because I don't think people do this as much as they should. But when they have a good interaction with a publisher, and that publisher is going to be CMON. I recently, a couple months ago, got the latest Marvel United, the Multiverse all-in gigantic bundle, and I don't know, about 4 of my boxes were kind of dented in from the sheer weight of the amount of content in that box. And so I reached out.
Too many stretch goals?
Yeah, too many, way too many. It was a giant Galactus that filled up the entire box.
So naturally, you just complained on Board Game Geek, right? You just went right to Board Game Geek. Okay. After you went to Facebook, you went to Board Game Geek.
Yeah, I went to the Game Found page, made 5 angry posts there. I did 3 or 4 threads on Board Game Geek.
Yep, got to align your posts.
In the Marvel United Multiverse page and the regular Marvel United page and the upcoming DC one, just to notify people that this could be an issue. I filled out 40 tickets with CMON. Really not that big of a. I mean, they were pretty dented in. I'm not going to say that, but. So I reached out and I was like, "Hey, these came in, sent over pictures." And they responded and said, we'll get this taken care of. Might be, we want to fulfill the rest of the Kickstarter and get all that type of stuff. So it might be a while. And the boxes showed up the other day in pristine condition and replaced those out. And so I just wanted to give them a shout out for taking care of a customer, and no podcast host cred was used to expedite that. That was as Joe Civilian. So I appreciate that, because that can't be an easy thing to replace, is just empty boxes. So kudos to them.
The whole way. So I was lost. Not the content in there, just the boxes.
Just the boxes, yeah. Which is all I asked for. I mean, I don't need a full new game. It's just these boxes are dented, and it was like one of the things down the line. It was like, well, if I ever do decide to move on from these, I would like to not have smashed in boxes,
Yeah, and that is a difference from your collection to my collection. I think that you have, because of how your room is set up where you store your games and you don't have any gremlin fingers, as I would say, children who are, your games are in pristine condition.
Yeah,
all your games are near mint. If you look at the shelves, even the blurry picture behind mine, you could see some that we share games. It's like, isn't like, look at the Cargo Noir that's sitting above me, right?
Yeah, but
compare that to your Cargo Noir, right?
Yeah, yours came that way though.
Yeah, completely dented and smashed up. No, so you do a nice job of keep curating a beautiful collection, Doug.
All right. Well, let's move on to our spotlight this week. This week we're going to be talking about Gnome Hollow, and we're going to do things a little bit differently. I've got a little bit more of a description here we'll go through as opposed to just the straight stats. Even though they are pretty colorful, these mushrooms are safe to eat, I think. In Gnome Hollow, players become gnomes tasked with completing fairy rings, harvesting and selling mushrooms, and planting flowers. With each turn, players will choose and place 2 garden tiles in the central game area, connecting white mushroom paths to create fairy rings. If a player completes a ring controlled by their gnome, they immediately collect all of the mushrooms from that path and then move the leftmost ring marker on their player board to claim a bonus based on the number of tiles that make up the newly formed ring. The larger the fairy ring, the better the rewards. And the more rings you complete, the more points you'll score at the end of the game. After resolving completed rings, players may move one of their 2 gnomes to take one of 4 additional actions. Players can claim a new mushroom path. Claiming a mushroom path allows you to collect all the mushrooms when completing the path. You can visit the flower market to collect a flower token you don't already have, and the more flower tokens you collect throughout the game, the more points you score. You can also visit constructed signposts created throughout the game. Some ring bonuses allow you to add signposts to completed rings, and gnomes can gain one-time bonuses for each visit. Lastly, a gnome can head to the central stump and visit the pinwheel market. At the pinwheel market, players sell the mushrooms they collect throughout the game. You may sell 2 different types of mushroom per visit. However, players can only sell each number of mushrooms once. For example, once somebody makes a sale for 5 red mushrooms, nobody else can sell 5 red mushrooms on their turn. And you better sell those mushrooms while you can, because they don't score points at the end of the game. The game ends when a player has gathered their 8th flower, moved their 8th ring marker, or the bag runs out of tiles. Players score points based on the number of flowers they've collected, the number of ring markers they've placed, and the treasure they earn from selling mushrooms throughout the game. Gnome Hollow is a 2 to 4 player family game from TheOp that plays in about 60 minutes. Besides bright and vibrant artwork, the player boards are magnetic, so you never misplace your ring markers. In addition, the deluxe upgrade pack, sold separately, replaces all of the cardboard tokens with screen-printed wood tokens. So what are you waiting for? Start growing a massive white beard and wander into the woods to forage mushrooms. This was published last year, and the designers are Aman Anderson and the artist is by Aman Anderson and Patrick Speziante, and for ages 12 plus, 10 plus, which I think is about accurate.
Yep.
All right. So what do you like about the game, Michael?
I like a lot about the game. I enjoy... I mean, there's something very pleasurable about finishing the ring and then having that generate something, and then you got to move your character. So you're constantly having to move throughout this board, and the board is always evolving. I also really enjoyed playing this game with my kids.
Yeah.
There's quite the conversation if you get into Board Game Geek or other places about best fit for this game. I will tell folks this is still set up on my table next door. Even though, this segment is airing now, my kids don't want me to put the game away. They want to continue to play it. They want to come back to it. So for me, this is fun, and it works in a lot of different settings with a lot of different groups. And I like how the game evolves as the game goes on. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got an accessible and straightforward turn structure that I think really works well. The artwork and the world building elements are very engaging when this is set up on the table. It encourages you to dive in. The magnetic boards are awesome. The way that those work in holding on to your ring markers and the way that just a simple thing usually, nowadays that's done by a dual layer board, but the fact that they did magnetic really helps for table bumps and things like that. The scoring at the end of the game is dead simple. You just have on your player board, there's a chart that's basically how many flowers did you collect? It'll give you a point down there. How many ring markers did you use? It'll give you a point up there. Add those along with the treasures that you collected. That's your score. Super simple. So there's none of that. Okay, how many? I've got 8 of these, and that is this. Like none of that. Those are pretty much just written on there, which I think
flowers plus route plus points. I mean, a 12-year-old can figure it out.
I think the upgrade components are really nice. I think they're more affordable than most upgraded components based on the number that you get. Like the idea of getting rid of all of the cardboard tokens in the game is awesome. As far as a couple of issues, I think there are some rules ambiguities, but I don't think that those show up in casual or family games.
I agree with that.
And I think if you're going into this with a super high competitive nature, they may come up and they may not. But if they do...
And then more things could also come up that are not always necessarily positive outcomes, such as analysis paralysis, such as undoing a turn to get perfect tile placement to make sure that you optimize your turn to get one added or yellow mushroom, right? So I think the approach to this game is key, and I think that's worth saying, especially if people have heard about this, if it's coming, back into your store, if it's around and you're looking at it. I would say make sure you have folks that have fun playing games like Ticket to Ride. Yeah, not where it's cutthroat arm wrestling and money on the line for it. And then the other thing, not to interrupt you, but I interrupted you, and I'll just finish interrupting you with, I agree, the wooden components are really nice. They increase the toy factor.
The downtime in this game can certainly be an issue. It is an interesting one with while you're placing those tiles. I don't know what it is about the paths, but you and I play a ton of board games and a ton of spatial board games, and I am a fan of spatial and tile placement. And it's like you're going to have to pick. It's very hard to look at the things on the board and then feel like, oh yeah, that's the one I need, and it'll go right there. You pretty much pick it up and you're like, oh wait, no, that's not going to make that connection. I need one of these. Oh wait, no, that doesn't make the connection. What kind of piece am I looking for? That's going to happen in this game. Yeah. And certainly with younger players. Now, if you're playing it, like Michael said, like with serious hobby gamers, that could get really annoying. However, sometimes players open up new options while they're playing, so that downtime, although it can stretch out depending on how you're playing the game, Michael may activate a new flower. Well, then now my gnome can go and get that flower, or put out a new signpost, and now my gnome can go over there. So it does, even though there is a slowdown sometimes, the options that are created because of that slowdown can make your turn better.
Well, and if you're playing with kids, if you're playing with your kids or with younger gamers, you have a chance to participate on their turn as well. Because it is a game that will require, my opinion, okay, when I'm playing this game with my kids, it requires me to help facilitate their turns. Now, maybe after we've played 5 or 6 games together over a year, I'm not going to need to do that as much. Yeah. And it's not in the sense that I'm alpha gaming. It's in the sense that I need to be available to answer specific questions that come up in a game like this. And so why I mentioned that and why that's different, if I'm playing with our game group, I don't need to be available on your turn to help you with your rules. I'm just sitting there waiting for my turn.
Yeah.
Right? But if I'm playing with my kiddos or with my family and almost GMing and playing the game, I don't feel the downtime as much. The other thing that I'll say, this is a game that's available on Board Game Arena. So if you're going to a board game cafe or playing it at a convention, you could learn a lot of the rules and get really good teach right there on Board Game Arena before you play it in person. I think that would help a lot of people.
Yeah, I think too the last thing I want to say is when this game came out and it got kind of buzz on the Dice Tower and kind of the game almost as a gamer's game. And I think I went into this game with that kind of idea that this is going to be a little crunchy, or you're going to be able to get down and compete. And I think those expectations are wrong. I think this game shines in a family setting, intergenerational, with the idea of we're making a ruling and moving on. Type of an approach to this game, where if you're playing with gamers, it's going to be, oh, well, that threw off my whole strategy. I need a rules clarification, and if the rules clarification doesn't go the way I need it to go, my game is ruined, and I'm not going to win well. And it's like,
and then Doug's in the middle, trying to mediate the
well,
child on his left and the child on his right who don't happen to be his child. Yeah, the only thing that I'll add into that, it does benefit from having a gamer at the table.
Sure.
Because of the different mechanics, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree, intergenerational. Totally agree. I could play this with my ma and with my kids, but I need to be at the table helping to move that game along. Yeah,
my 12-year-old is not going to be complaining about the ruling of this, whatever. It's going to be, all right, this is what I'm doing. And they when kids are playing this game, they're more focused on creating cool paths and collecting mushrooms and getting flowers and doing all of the thematic parts of the game, and the scoring is almost secondary.
Yeah, or building homes for their gnome on the side with components from another game.
And I think that's where this game shines, and it's a great family game on that end. So that is our Spotlight game from TheOp, Gnome Hollow. All right, before we move on, I want to remind everybody that they can sign up for the Discord by going to gameschooler.com/Discord. It is a great community there of folks sharing the games that they're playing and responding to our high fives and School of Gaming segments, all of those. I also want to encourage everybody to watch, subscribe, and like our YouTube channel and our videos. Every podcast that we release goes up. There is a video version. And hopefully we're going to get some more content going out there. But we'd like to get those numbers a little bit higher. I know we haven't paid too much attention to it. It's kind of on and off. But any little things you can do, whether it's subscribing, watching, and liking, that is greatly appreciated. Spread the word about the podcast as well if you are so inclined. And if you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us. Email at gameschooler.com. We would love to hear from you. Now, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Pirates of Maracaibo. Doug, give us the stats.
All right. Published in 2024, at least the U.S. release was, from Capstone Games. The designers are Ralph Meinert, Ryan Hendrickson, and Alexander Pfister. And the art is by Christian Fiore and Odysseus Stamaglu. I'm so bad at these names. Anywho. In Pirates of Maracaibo, players become swashbuckling ship captains by hiring the best crew, plundering the most treasure, and navigating the high seas in the Caribbean at the end of the 17th century. Over 3 rounds, players will take turns moving their ship token across 1 to 3 spaces and taking actions on the cards they stop on until one of the ships reaches the port of Maracaibo. Players must move their ship at least one column closer to the port on each turn, and pay doubloons to any ship currently occupying the space that they end their turn on. These spaces include improvement, residence, and location cards. Acquiring improvement cards can give pirates one-time actions, permanent abilities, victory points, and ongoing income. Players purchase improvements by paying the cost in the upper left-hand corner and replacing the card with the next card from the draw deck. Although spendy, residence cards offer pirates the chance to trigger conditional scoring opportunities at the end of the game. And the first pirate to build each residence also receives 2 bonus victory points. Location cards allow players to upgrade their ship and take an additional action. Upgrade cubes enable you to upgrade your ship with one-time or permanent abilities. The actions on location cards allow you to go raid, bury treasure, and explore islands. Players can go raiding to gain points, doubloons, and treasure by rolling the aptly named raiding dice. After rolling the 3 raiding dice, players will select one of the dice and spend raid points based on the pip value of the chosen dice, plus any raiding bonuses they have acquired. Each treasure in the game, emeralds, gold, and pearls, are represented by island boards in the Caribbean. Although you cannot land on these islands, you can acquire cubes from them and increase the value of each treasure type by adding new cubes to the islands. Players can rack up even more points by burying treasure on their player board. Another action allows players to explore the islands on the exploration board. Players gain bonuses based on how far they progress and where they stop their trek. Each round ends when a player reaches Maracaibo on the exploration board, at which point players gain income and then move back to the start of the Caribbean. The game ends at the end of 3 rounds, and the pirate with the most victory points from improvement cards, exploration bonuses, residences, and completed quest cards wins the game. Pirates of Maracaibo is a 90-minute hobby game for 1 to 4 players, published in the US by Capstone Games. So set sail, pull out ye fanciest peg leg, and prepare to talk like a pirate in this Euro-style game of treachery and booty. So that is briefly how you play Maracaibo. A little bit more tricky as a hobby game, and it's probably going to start at 12 plus.
Yeah, 12 to 14 even plus, but yeah.
So that's Pirates of Maracaibo. What do you like, Michael?
I love that no 2 games are the same. I love that in the multiple games that I've played, the finishes have been very close, yet the strategies from the players varied greatly during the game. And you can have one player who's racking up a ton of points during the game and another player who's loading up on quest cards, and 80% of their points are going to come after the game.
Yeah.
I really like that timing of how far do I want to go? When do I want to be the first one in to declare the end of the round? What's the payoff on the bonuses if I race to the end of the round versus if I stay out here and sail around a little bit more? For me, I prefer the base game. I've tried a few of the different modules that are out there on Board Game Arena, and there's just so much in that base game because the setup changes from game to game. It's different every time based on how those cards come out, right? So there's maybe I said a lot there, maybe I didn't say anything at all. One other thing that I just want to mention before I send it back to you, I love the upgrading the ship, Doug.
Yeah.
And in so many games like this, if there's a track to explore, I'm going to explore that track and try to race towards the end. And I feel like there are some design constraints that were put into the game that in order to do that, I was forced to upgrade my ship. And I really enjoyed the different upgrades and how they opened up other avenues to the game that I might not have experienced otherwise. So,
yeah, I love that this is a Euro pirate game. It's a thinky pirate game, and yet it still maintains a lot of the feelings that you would expect or get from a pirate game. There is still plundering and raiding. There is still assembling a crew to get those better abilities and upgrading your ship and exploring. And it still has, although the attacking that's the one part that could kind of be missing, right? You would expect a pirate game to have take that, or I'm going to steal a whole bunch of stuff from you. That's not in this game. However, so there's not that direct take that type of, well, your plunder is now my plunder. The attacking or that feeling in the game is subtle, which is Michael getting to a location before I do. So it's like he's not stealing something that I've already acquired, but that threat of I hope he doesn't land, I hope he doesn't go to that space. I hope I can get that card first. And then even if he takes the card that I wanted, the card that he flips over may be good as well. And then I'm having that conversation is like, is it worth me to pay him to go onto that spot to get that card now? And so although it's not in your face, there is that subtle tension going on that feels piratey. The I got this before you got it, rather than I'm boarding your ship and taking all of your stuff, if that makes sense. And I like that. Sometimes there are pirate games, whether we talked about Pirates Cove or Viking Raiders is a similar type of theme of those are smash you in the teeth and I'm going to take your stuff type of games. We are going to battle. And there's a time and place for that. But I like that this game is different on that end.
Yeah, and I think, not to just jump ahead, but I do think what you're talking about, not that you said that it's missing, but there's an expansion that's going to be coming to North America this year. It's one of those things where it has a 2024 date on it, but I think it's coming out in the next few months here. The Commanders expansion that will involve, raid. The BGG description is a skilled captain, fort raids, and rum. What more could a pirate ask? And so I think the base game, there's so much goodness in that base game. And you could tell the skilled design work that went into it, that you can plug in modules and expansions and other things when you get those mechanics in the base game right. You touched on a really good point, and I didn't think of that, and I wish I would have had it in my notes because it was smart. But the interaction, some of it comes into the movement and the actions that players take. So there's not a moment of downtime, because while I'm still processing what I just did on my turn, whether it's upgrading my ship or exploring or actually figuring out how much money I actually have and did I do my math right, I'm also keeping an eye out for what the next person is doing and where they're going, and then it's your turn. And if we're in a 3-player game, all of a sudden it's back to me. It has some of that sense of like some of the Emerson Matsuuchi games that we talked about, over 100 episodes ago now, though, where I need to be told it's my turn. It's your turn again. It's your turn again. The turns are just so rapid in Pirates of Maracaibo.
Yeah, it looks like when you look at the board the first time through, it looks like there is a lot to take in. But just a simple limitation of you can have 1 to 3 movements limits your options. And that, to your point, most people know where they want to go by the time their turn rolls around.
Yeah.
It's because it's limited. Like, all right, these are the 4 or 5 places I can get to because I have to move closer. So I can't stay in the column that I'm in. So I have to move closer. And those spots being narrowed down really cuts down any AP. And it is that, oh, okay, it's my turn. I know where I want to go. You're just kind of waiting. It's almost like after your first turn, you're like, I know where I want to go next. Hopefully it's still there. And if not, this is my second choice. So people are ready to go.
Yeah, and your incentives are narrow enough, right? So you don't have a ton of things to look at. And what I also like, there's most of the information is open, but those quest cards, you don't know what quest cards I have necessarily.
Yeah.
So there's just a little bit of private information to get people looking across the table and thinking, well, is he going to go there? Where's he trying to get points? This is a good one, Doug.
Yep. The other things is that you mentioned I love gaining more abilities as you go and just kind of ramping up. As far as things to be aware of, there are a lot of icons in this game.
Yeah.
However, I think the rules are clear and there's not a lot of ambiguity about what things mean. Once you find it, it's like I can have my own opinions on maybe I would have chosen a different icon for certain things. But once you know the icons, it's fairly straightforward as you go along. And I don't recall ever having any things of like, oh, you can't do that, or this is not going to work. It's a pretty well designed game on that front.
Well, and to your point, it's a 2.8 on Board Game Geek. We have this as hobby or light hobby, however you want to split the difference. I haven't gone to the rule book.
Yeah.
You taught the game. It was succinct and clear. I played the game, and I think that says a lot. Before we get into some of the skills or anything, any buyer beware or caveats or things to note about it?
No, the only thing I've got, outside of the icons and being aware that there's a bunch in there, is there is a playmat for this game. It's not included with the game, and it's not really necessary. However, it does two things. One is it helps you lay out the cards to make the C the main game board, which is nice. And because it is like a C background and blends in with the C cards, it really does give you a good like open sea feeling. And I haven't played without it, so I don't know, but I feel like I do feel like there would be something a little missing if it wasn't.
The playmat's really good. It's really good, especially just knowing where the next card comes in. That card flipping, I'm kind of clumsy by nature, and just having a precise place to place the next card,
yeah.
I appreciate that. And I know a board game gives you that, but sometimes the cards on cardboard, things are sliding around, islands are running into each other.
Yeah. Well, and the card-based board essentially does add a lot of variety in the way that the islands are constructed and come out onto the board and play. And you are taking some out, and you may never see some during a game. So there is a lot of variety, and I think this is one of those games that sometimes publishers and designers can go overboard with. Oh, look at all of the variety and options at this. This one is a good one, which is like you're shuffling the deck and you're not sure what's coming out. There's 10, and you're going to take 5 of them and use them in the game. And yes, you would have to play the game so many times to be like, oh, I guess this one's not in the game this time, which would be insane. So this is a good, approachable variety that keeps it mixed up, where if this was just on a straight board with set islands, I can't imagine how fast it would feel samey, and it'd be like, oh, okay, well, this is the predominant strategy, or I'm going to do this every time. So I like that mix-up.
There's multiple winning strategies is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
From game to game. How about skills, Doug?
Well, the big one, I think, is the observation in keeping an eye on what the other players are doing, what islands might be available for you. But that leads into like the tactical thinking, is because with that ever-changing board, you don't know what's coming out in the space that somebody else just took an upgrade card from. And maybe your options just blew wide open of like, oh, I want to explore, but there's no cards, there's no place I can go to explore on this turn. And then Michael goes somewhere and reveals a new card, and all of a sudden there's an explore option. And so you have to be ready to take advantage of those when they pop up. So I think this is a really good tactical thinking game, just pivoting on what's available.
Yeah, and that risk management. It's turn to turn from about the third turn in of, well, I can go in first to end the round, and then I'm going to get an extra bonus, or I could stay out here at C. But if I stay out here at C and the other two that I'm playing with go in, I'm kind of stuck. And like you just said as well, sometimes knowing when to go after certain treasures, because there's 3 different resources. It's a hobby level game. We didn't get into everything, right, that there's to cover, but just that there's a low level stress of risk layered throughout the game that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because there's a sense of I'll be able to get to that eventually. I'm smart enough to be able to drive the value of the pearls down only to drive them up later, and so you have those different economic decisions too that I don't always get in a pirate themed game, and I don't always get in a Euro, and I feel like I'm getting them in this game in abundance.
Yeah, the other two that kind of go together for me is the logistics, which I think is piggybacking on what you're kind of talking about, which is I do have some of these overarching strategies of, okay, I'm kind of invested in this, or I have certain quests, and it's like, how am I going to accomplish those in what order, and do I have enough time to accomplish those, and how that happens. And one of the ways that I really enjoy the next skill that I have, which is spatial perception, because I think it ties into that a little bit, is when you're talking about like tile placement games, it's like, oh, will this fit there, or will that do there? And we're talking about, can you visually, in your mentally rotate a tile and figure out where it's going to go on the board before you even place it, right? There's that level of spatial perception. This one, what I like about it is that it's that mental thing of imagining your boat of like, oh, I can get here. Okay, I could move there. And you're doing it while other people are taking your turns, right? We talked about that kind of planning in between, and then it's your turn. But just that simple spatial awareness and perception to be able to imagine your boat, like I can get here without having to pick up your boat and move it to those places, that is going on the entire game.
Yep.
So if you're, you got a younger player, a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever who can get to play this game, they're going to be doing this on their off time. And I think that's a great skill of visualizing, okay, I can get to that card, I could get to this card, and what can I do with that? Which then piggies back to that the logistics of how am I accomplishing what I need to accomplish.
Yeah, you covered a lot of skills there, and it's a well-designed game. It's a fun game. It's hard to believe. I think this is the first game of Alexander Pfister that we've covered as a game of the week.
Yeah,
and part of that is because of it is fairly accessible, even though it is a hobby game. Even though you could be playing for up to an hour if you're playing with your family, rules are straightforward, fairly digestible and understandable. You can watch a video, get this thing up and running. So that's glad we got to talk about it today, Doug.
Yep, so that is our game of the week, Pirates of Maracaibo from Capstone Games. Let's move on to the School of Gaming.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week we ask, is there too much jargon in the hobby?
Yes.
Done. Now on to our...
Short answer, yes. What does jargon mean, Michael?
Oh, gosh. I commonly get jargon and vernacular mixed up. But jargon is going to be vocabulary that is specific to a setting. So... within the board game hobby, we're talking about vocabulary that is specific to itself, to the hobby. While Doug is talking smart, I'll get a Google definition and interrupt you in just a moment.
You already surpassed what I expected, so I think we can bounce off of that. The question of jargon being, Michael.
That's pretty good.
Did you nail it?
Pretty good. Special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or group and are difficult for others to understand.
There you go.
I got about 80% of it.
Yeah. So this would be when we would be referring to a very specific type of mechanisms or publishing terms or, there's so many in the industry. The question would be, is it bad?
Yeah.
And I think there's a starting point right there. Is the jargon bad?
Well, I think what the jargon does, it limits the audience because you need a level of comprehension and understanding to even engage with the reviewers and to find out what they're talking about. And if you don't have interest, there's barriers there. And I was listening to a podcast just this week, and in an 8-second span, 8 seconds, because I knew we had this segment coming up, so I went back, I timed it.
Yeah.
The word crunchy, cozy, chonky, and chunky were used to describe the game and the meeples in the game.
Yeah.
And it was two different people talking very excitedly about an amazing game, a game that could potentially be game of the year for them. And you could just hear how they love the game.
Yeah.
But like if I went upstairs and if I said to my wife, hey, the game we played was really crunchy, and she's not going to respond. And this is somebody who's played, quite a few board games. She's not going to respond and say, oh, well, I'd rather play a game that's cozy.
Yeah.
And then so that's where I'll start on it.
Yeah, I think it certainly can be a gatekeeping situation.
I don't think it's intentional, Doug.
No, and I think that's the biggest part. And I would often, we often relate when we talk in this segment, the School of Gaming segment, of how our hobby relates to other hobbies. And having somebody talk to me about wine tasting, my eyes would gloss over the same way that non-gamers would probably hear most of our podcast, right?
Yeah.
As just like, I don't know what you're following. Or, I can't follow what you're saying, and I need it in more simpler and broken down terms. Unfortunately, I don't, like, to your point, is like, it's not intentional. It's just stuff that you pick up, and then it becomes a shorthand. And I'm divided between the idea of it becomes a problem when you are using it to gatekeep. If you are using the jargon to make yourself sound more important or knowledgeable with the direct intention of making somebody feel like they don't know as much about gaming as you do because you know these terms, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't know that it is. What's the smirk for, Michael? What do you got?
I'm just thinking of a few times where that's actually happened. And those are the times where I then double down and want to fight. And it's never happened with you, Doug. But we were at a luncheon one time where it happened, where some guy was flexing a little bit. And that's where I then started to engage in the conversation. Here's where I run into the jargon in the hobby still, is that if I want to learn about a new type of game and that field within the hobby is completely new to me. Easy example, within the last year, I've played just a few, not many, but a couple of war games. And there's a whole new set of vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the rule books look different. And I don't want to say clip art because the war gamers will be really upset with me, but I don't have beautiful Kwanchai Moria art to look at.
Oh, no, it's straight MS Paint.
Thank you. Yet, when I play that game at a convention that I just impulsively signed up for the day before, the person teaching it couldn't have been nicer. And so my interactions of where I ran into the language barriers were when I was trying to learn about the game by myself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the jargon isn't at a demo from a publisher. It isn't if I'm playing the game with people for the first time at a convention. It isn't where I would get nervous or anxious or possibly even upset. It's when I'm experiencing the medium for the first time and I get into a space that is completely foreign. I'm like, wait, what do they say? It's like if I'm listening to you talk to somebody who paints minis. Yeah. Right? I am basically not listening. I'm listening to be polite, and I'm nodding, and I'm making sure that the person's being kind to you. But beyond that, it's like, I don't understand what you said. I don't know what you mean. There's different types of paintbrushes. And I think sometimes when people hear, like, you have a podcast, there's different types of board games. Yeah. And so.
Well, and I think the jargon is often when we talk about board games on this show and we talk about people that are in the hobby and look down at newcomers, I think jargon is one of the ways that people don't realize how far in that they are. Is you accumulate words and the vernacular of the hobby as you go, and it's hard for you to then strip that out of your brain and remember what it was like to be a new gamer or a first-time gamer of like, oh, you don't know what that means. And you know, you had mentioned when you first started coming to game night, and Dan and I would be talking about a game or a rule set, and it was like this, and we have a shorthand and we're ready to play, and you're still
glazed over.
You know, what do I do with these cards?
Is this competitive or are we cooperating in this game?
And so I think that the jargon becomes a place that people get lost in not realizing the uniqueness of the language that you're using, and maybe that they have to slow down to new people. And like you said, I don't think in most cases it's intentional. Certainly if it gets to the point where it's being arrogant about it, then that's where the problem comes in. And so I don't think we need to prevent the jargon because it has a
useful place.
Yeah, it's very useful in the hobby of getting games up running faster and being able to describe a game quickly and either cross it off a list. All of the good things that come with having a unique language in a hobby. The problem comes in is when we don't take the time to explain it or realize that some people may not know what we're talking about, and almost being offended that you would have to slow down and explain what a drafting game is or what deck building means and things like that. And certainly if I'm teaching games to non-gamers and it's a deck building game, I would usually say we're going to be deck building, which is the process of acquiring cards and then making a stronger set that you will be playing from. You know, you're explaining that in the process. I don't just, it's a deck building game, good luck. You know, that type of thing.
I'm going to do mine, you do yours.
Yeah. So do you feel like there's any reason to combat it or just be more aware of it?
For me, it's an awareness.
Yeah.
Because as I was preparing for the segment, the other thing that I had in my notes is the usefulness of jargon is it allows me to relive shared experiences that are awesome.
Yeah.
I can talk to you and to other people about a game that we have played, or I can tell you about an experience that I've had playing a game with my family or out in the community, and in 3 or 4 sentences get across shared meanings to help you make decisions to decide if that's a game that you're interested in to learn more about. Because in an industry where you have 3,500 to 5,000 games that are published per year, right, it does help with filtering. So there are those positive aspects of it that I think get weighed within the hobby. For me, it allows to relive shared experiences and to communicate my thoughts on a game to other people in the hobby
efficiently.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm in line with you. I think it certainly has a place. I think you just need to be aware of it, and when you are using it in a way that may be prohibitive to other people at the table, and depending on who you're playing with.
The last thing that I'll say, what I'm aware of on our podcast, jargon can also be very trendy.
Yeah.
You know, those 4 words that I talked about at the top of the segment.
I will some of those I will never use.
Crunchy, cozy, chonky, chunky. Like I
guess which ones I would not use. Outside of the time I'm going to say it right now, I will never say the word chunky on this podcast.
I don't know which one you said, chunky or chonky.
Chonky.
Your Illinois Valley came in a little bit there, Doug.
Chonky. Chonky will. Now I've said it 3 times.
Yeah, okay. Got you to break your rule.
Yeah.
That there's almost a sense of, as the hobby churns and the hotness, here's our jargon that's most closely aligned with the games that are in the hotness right now. And that's something that I'm aware of too, but I think that's even a different segment. Maybe that's like a segment within this segment.
Yeah.
It's just to say, like, very aware of the words we use on our show. And I try to be, cautious with the trendy jargon words.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from teachers that are in the Discord and librarians, the folks that are playing with non-gamers regularly and introducing new games, whether this comes up, it's an issue, or if they're just able to avoid it, or if they catch themselves using words, that type of thing. I'd love to hear. So, log into the Discord and let us know your thoughts on that. We'd love to hear it. Let's move on to the high five. Every week, Michael and I highlight a list of games we want to play, enjoy, or spread the word about. And people love lists, so, let's roll with it. This week, we are going to be talking about the high five games with multi-use cards, which was a harder list to put together than I thought, and I wish more companies or designers used this. And so the idea of a multi-use card is a game in which one card could be used for many things. I tried to eliminate games where it was literally just you can do the action or scrap it, almost like a currency type thing. I tried to avoid that. Those were like my cutoff. I really wanted it to have either 2 or 3 very distinct different things that you could do with the cards depending on how you played it. Did you have a hard time with this one?
No.
Because they're all Dune Imperium, straight up and down?
So 2 caveats.
Okay.
One, I did not include any games of the week or spotlight games on my list. There's so many good games to talk about.
Interesting.
So I added that constraint in. Secondly, I think we could do this list a year from now, and I'd likely have 5 new games to talk about. There's a ton on my want to play list that feature this mechanic. And then one fun fact for you, Douglas. At the time of this recording, 8 of the top 30 games on Board Game Geek feature this mechanic. So that sense of I could do this or I could do that, or I could do this to allow me to do that. It's in a lot of the games that, and I'm not saying on the hotness, I'm saying of all time.
Yeah, and some of those games, because I was looking at it, and there are quite a few of them that it's like these are out of my play style. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there are quite a few of them. And it's like they branch into where they're getting to more complex, heavier style games, where it's like I wish that they showed up more in easier family weight games, and maybe that's just a thing that's not possible because of the nature of having to learn multiple parts of a card, but.
I think you need to design that game, Doug. Anything is possible.
All right. What do you got at number 5, Michael?
Number 5 for me is Pioneer Rails, designed by Jeffrey D. Allers and Matthew Dunstan, released in 2023 from Dranda Games. And a little bit of Board Game Geek flavor text for y'all. Flip and right where the card selected determines which part of the map. Or no, these are my words. Never mind. It's a flip and right where the card selected determines which part of the map a route must go, and that card goes toward completing a poker hand that scores at the end of the round. And although that might not sound like, the points are really tight in this game. So getting a few extra points over each of the 4 rounds because you completed solid poker sets. I got a 3 of a kind here. I got 2 pair there. And you're getting more points. That I love that multi-use, and the cards are beautiful. So that's my number 5 is Pioneer Rails.
Cool. All right, my number 5 we talked about way back in episode 59, and this was like right on the edge. But that is Deep Blue from Days of Wonder, and in this game, as you're acquiring your crew. You can spend those crew sometimes to allow you to move. You can spend those crew to recruit more members to your entourage, or you can spend it while you're in a dive to potentially score more points. And that's the tricky part of the game, which is if you spend them to move and you have not rested in time that you go on a dive or are part of another person's dive, you are not going to be able to play those cards that get you more points on a dive.
Yep.
And so different than maybe a traditional type of deck builder where it's like, oh, yeah, you could use it for currency or the ability. This one really has that thing of like, I'm going to hold this for my own dive, or I need to move later. And so I feel like it's a little bit more that next step up from just a straight deck builder currency ability. It's that tension while you're holding the cards of, do I want to give this up now? So that's my number 5, Deep Blue.
Yeah, that's a great poll, and I need to puff our chests a little bit. We got that one right, Doug. That's a great game, and I feel like it's disappeared. Same designers that designed Heat.
Yeah.
And that's a really good game. If you want to learn more about it, go back and check out that segment in episode 59. All right, number 4 for me is Forest Shuffle. 2023
Hey, that's my
designer
number 4
is
too.
Kosh. Oh, wonderful. And so in Forest Shuffle, you've got these trees, and you've got to play the trees. But in order to play the tree, you might need to burn a card or 2. And by discarding them, if you discard the proper cards, that might trigger a bonus. Now, that right there is multi-use cards all over the place. But there's a north, east, west, south coordinate around the tree. So you got 4 different places where you can then place other animals and butterflies and funguses to score out points, and those points can score other points, and sometimes the end game scoring can take as long as the game itself.
Yeah.
Because the cards are so multi-use. So that's my number 4 is Forest Shuffle. I hear we got crossover, so I'll send it over to you.
No, I just love the idea of like you just said, that north and south and the cards divided in half, and that tricky decision of, do I want the animal that's on the top or the animal that's on the bottom? How am I going to play this card out? And that decision there is a really unique one, which is why it is my number 4 as well.
Awesome. And that was 2023. I don't know if I said that. Very good year for board games in our estimation. Number 3. So we're up to me for number 3.
Yep.
Endless Winter, Paleo Americans, 2022, designed by Stan Kordonsky. The cards give you resources. However, as an alternative, cards can be, and this part is a Board Game Geek flavor text. All right, so I should cite that. As an alternative, cards can be saved for an end-of-round eclipse phase where they are simultaneously revealed to determine the new player order and trigger various bonus actions. So I can put out the cards and I can instantly get resources and climb up one of the few available tech trees, or I can save a card to potentially put me in the best position for the next round, but I can't do both. And there's something to that decision with the cards in hand that has stuck with me since my initial play of it. A game I really enjoy. Don't have it in my collection, but one that I will probably seek out at a convention or to get another play in the next year or so. I really enjoy that game, Endless Winter Paleo Americans.
Awesome. All right. My number 3 is a game called Imperial Settlers. This is from Portal Games way back in 2014, if you can imagine, from designer Ignacy Trevicek. And in this one, the cards that you acquire allow you to do 3 different things, and they're very interesting. So you can build a card, right? You just play the resources and it goes in front of you. The other thing is that some cards you can make a deal and you pay and you basically turn the card upside down and it becomes income every round, and it becomes an income card for you as opposed to the ability of building the card. And the third thing that you can do is each card also has a raise ability, so you can basically destroy a building and get that bonus for it. So figuring out how and when and where you're going to use those cards is like, do I want to build this, or do I just want to have a permanent food coming in every round? Or, do I want to destroy this card from my hand in order to get these one-time bonuses, or build it to maybe get more bonuses? So that cute, adorable artwork on this one, and that's my number 3, Imperial Settlers.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, number 2 for me is a game that another one. As we go through these lists, it's like, oh, I want to play these games again.
Yeah.
Right. I want to come back to this game, and that's Lacrimosa. 2022 is the year that it was published, designed by Gerard Asheni and Farron Renalis, and this is published by Devere Games. The theme on this one, Doug, it's a little bit wild. Okay. Mozart's widow is, traveled through time,
Naturally.
to help you to finish the Requiem. And it's not set modern day today, but you're kind of traipsing around Europe in the time-ish of Mozart. Well, how does this relate to multi-use cards? Because to finish the Requiem, you need to get certain cards, and you tuck them into your board, and they're going to give you resources. They're going to act as resource generators. And it's just the sense of ordering down where the card goes and the action selection and making that decision. I will candidly tell you, I've only played the game solo, but I had enough fun what I was doing with those cards and how it triggered the actions out on the board while trying to accomplish the objectives, that it's stayed in my collection, almost 2 years later from when I first got it. So that's one that, as soon as I saw this high five segment, I was like, yeah, that the how those cards are used in hand or when they're placed on the board. It's not just to burn it to get the income, it's to use the card, but I'm not going to get it back again, but that's going to allow me to get potential resources for more cards. So you're that constant churn of hand management.
All right. My number 2 was never a game of the week, but we did talk about it in episode 72. And that is Campaign Trail, which is currently published by Gray Fox Games. Originally came out in 2019. But what I love about this is that there are about 6 different things that you can do throughout the game, but each card is usually only going to have 4 of those on each card. And so you can use this card as basically foregoing all of the other abilities on it to take a travel action or to get more money. You can register new voters. You can advertise in certain states. You do campaigning in certain states. You could use the card for its ability on the front of it, or you save the card to the debate round, and it'll have special abilities. So you have this hand of cards, and again, not every card has all of those abilities on it, but you are then debating of, okay, if I use it for a travel action, that means I can't use any of this other stuff on the card. And so you're trying to figure out which part of the card is the best for you at a given time that you want to keep and or hold on to. And I love that, and the way that they're all thematically related to what you're doing is really cool. I feel like when you play this game, you feel like a political candidate.
Yeah.
Spending money, trying to recruit new voters, and doing all of the things that go into a campaign without getting bogged down in messy politics of the time. So that's my number 2, Campaign Trail.
Awesome. Yeah, great game. Whereas my number 2 and my number 4, Lacrimosa and Forest Shuffle, both focused on which part of the card am I going to use, the top or the bottom, how am I going to place it. My number 1, and if there's crossover, I'll just get a nod from you, but my number 1 is Bruges. And all right, then I'm not going to say a whole lot about it other than just an awesome game and how the cards work in that. The first time that I ever really played, my head started to hurt about halfway through, and then all of a sudden I kind of saw how the game worked, and it just clicked. The hand management with the cards. I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about why the cards in Bruges are so awesome, Doug.
Well, yeah, it's got a very similar thing to what I was just describing in a Campaign Trail, which is there's 4 or 5 different things on each card, and you're only going to play a set number of cards per round. And so how you want to use that, do you want to turn it into a house? Do you want to play it for its color to get income? Do you want to play it to build a part of the canal? And,
yes.
And so it's that It's that situation then where you're also drafting cards off the top of the deck, trying to get the colors that you need in order to take the actions that you want. Some of them give you more workers, and you need those workers to fire off other actions. So it's a big, you're planning ahead that next turn of like, ooh, I need more purple workers, so I hope I draw some purple cards because I may need to use them for the workers. And then you get the card in your hand, and you're like, that's a really cool ability. I think I may want to put that guy in a house.
Yeah.
So that
so I can use it in future rounds. I'll find a different purple card.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, ooh, I did want to play this brown card down, but the brown dice is showing a 6, which means I could get a huge amount of money just for kind of shutting this card out. So that pivoting back and forth throughout the entire game is what really makes it unique.
Yeah, how the value of the dice also impact the value of the card that's in your hand, and only you really know about that.
Yeah.
Steffenfeld, 2013 Z-Man Games, Bruges.
Yep. Awesome. Any honorable mentions for you, Michael?
Yeah, I do. I have a handful of honorable mentions. I'll just fly through a couple of them quickly. Some of them are games that used to be in your collection. Audience members can read into that how they choose. But The City from Thomas Lehman and art by Clement Franz. It's a game that's re-implemented by Jump Drive, but just making awesome combinations with different cards in your hands. Furnace is a game published by Arcane Wonders and designed by Ivan Lashin, where your cards are, it's the order in which you put them is critical for how you're firing off your furnace, your machine. And then my third honorable mention is Expeditions, designed by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games, where the cards, you can use the ability or you can try to get the resources off of them. And that's just some from my honorable mention list.
Yeah, mine are kind of all fall into the same category, which are close to that edge, which is either kind of that thing of like use them or trash them type of thing, which is Lost Ruins of Arnak. It's a Wonderful World has cards that you use that way. And Comic Hunters is another one where it's like you need to use the cards to pay for other cards. And sometimes that, there's a couple games like that. Museum probably should be on the list for that, where it's like, do I use the card to pay for another card, or do I actually want this card?
Yeah.
And trying to balance that. So kind of skirting on the edge of multi-use, but that's why I didn't make the list.
It's your list.
Yeah. So subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. And again, subscribe to and like our videos on YouTube. We'd really appreciate that. And don't forget about the Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. Next week, we're going to be talking about Bonanza Dahlias, Intarsia, gatekeeping, and games with powerful abilities. Thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.